Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In my last video, I talked about how you can start to get ready to have an online portfolio by setting up your GitHub Pages website. Eventually, the goal is to replace all of that with a completely fleshed out website, and I'll show you how to do that using RStudio and Quarto. Now, before we get into that, I wanted to take a minute in this video and talk to you about the overall concept behind how this is going to work. It may sound a little bit complicated, but essentially there is a working directory where you build out your website, you test it, you play with it, you get it set up the way that you want it. And then you take the rendered files from that working directory and then you put it into that website directory that you created in that last video. And then that website folder will only have the files that it needs to produce the website that you see on the web. So let's talk about this for a minute. Here's a diagram that I drew, and we have your computer here. And in that, you have the username.github.io directory. That's the one that you set up last time. And I want you to imagine for a moment, we'll do this here, but I want you to imagine there's another directory, and I'm calling this one Portfolio Dev, and that's where you will do your work. That's where you will create your website that you want to put online. There is another parallel structure on GitHub which contains your username.github.io directory or your repo. And that is the one that is used to publish your website. So you have that cloned locally over here on your computer. But the one on GitHub is the one that will display your website. So what I'd like to have you do is have a mirror of that portfolio dev directory also on GitHub, but make it private, indicated by the lock icon here. What that will do is give you a safe place to back up all of your work on GitHub. And it doesn't have any direct connection to your published website, but it does connect to your local machine, just like the other directory. And so this, again, gives you just a safe way to work and keep everything backed up in a nice, safe place online. Now, the workflow here is that your working directory, portfolio dev in this case, is where you do your work. You make your changes, you try out new images, you make some new pages for your portfolio, whatever it is you want to do. You work on that first. And then when you render that, and you'll see about that in a moment, when you render that, you take the content of the folder called site, or it's underscore site, I believe, and you move that to your cloned folder that you created last time. And so you put that on your local machine in a different folder. You can either move it or copy it, it doesn't matter. And then step 3 would be to push all of those changes in that folder, that username folder, up to GitHub. And that will make it available online. So after it syncs up, that will become your new website that everybody sees. So again, you make your changes locally, you take the HTML content from that site folder and put it into your username folder, and then you push that to make it live. After that, I suggest that you back up your working directory on GitHub also. If you have another way to back it up, great, but this is a recommendation. And that one, again, is private, so it's not really available for public consumption. So any changes you see, any ideas that you're not finished with yet, no one will notice those. It will only change online when you take that site content and push it. And so you'll see how that works, but when you render your website images with Quarto, all your files, everything else, that is when it creates that site folder. So you may have to come back and watch this again after you see the Quarto video that follows, but that's essentially the workflow here. And to put it into another way, the first thing you would do in this whole process is to set up your private portfolio dev repo. You can call it whatever you want, but you would create that on GitHub. So just like you set up the other one, you can set up a new folder over on GitHub. And then using RStudio and Quarto, you can create your website. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And you start building it out. And you make that portfolio look like however you want it to look. And then you can use Git to push the changes to that private repo. So this is just going to allow you to keep everything backed up. And similarly, you'll push the changes for your site-specific files up to their own folder as well. And so then as you work, as you move along, down the road in the future, you would want to keep that maintained, keep your working directory maintained on GitHub, just keep it synced and updated. And you don't have to do that every time you work, but that's a good way to keep everything maintained. And then the part down here at the bottom, step 5, to update your actual visible website, your portfolio that everyone checks out, you'll need to manually move that site folder content into your username directory and then push that. So going back to the diagram, that's that step 3 here. And you don't have to do that third and the other one fourth. You can flip those. But the idea is that you push all of those changes in those respective folders up to GitHub. Just as another quick look at what actually is moving when you do that, we have your computer here. We have the 2 folders that you set up. One is the username folder. One is the development folder. In the development folder, and this is what we'll talk about later, you end up with some Quarto markdown files. These are working files. They're not the ones that go on the website. You'll also end up with a site folder which contains the content that will move. And that includes an index.html file and some other HTML files along with your images and everything else. That is what you will need to move into your username folder before you push it. I hope that clears things up a little bit. Again, keep this video as reference and come back to it after you do some development work on your portfolio, and you'll see how to keep everything maintained and safe on GitHub. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video. If you like this, please be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up, and it helps the channel. Take care. Have a great week.